Hello. Good morning, folks. Good morning. We're so excited for today. Thank you for joining us for day two, and we're looking forward to your panels. I'm not going to say anything because we've got great speakers ahead of us, so I'm going to let them start the day. Habiba Brahima, Dr. Brahima is going to introduce the day and our speaker, and then we'll move on to panels after we're done. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. And welcome to the 10th Annual Scholarship and Social Justice Undergraduate Research Conference. My name is Habiba Brahima. I use the she series pronouns, and I have the honor of serving as the Senior Director of the Harvard Foundation for Intercultural and Race Relations. It's a true pleasure to welcome all of you, students, faculty, staff, and guests, to what continues to be one of the most inspiring academic gatherings of the year. Now, before we dive into the powerful presentations and conversations ahead, I want to take a moment to acknowledge the history that brings us here. The Harvard Foundation was established in 1981 with a mission to promote intercultural understanding, foster inclusion, and celebrate the diversity of thought, identity, and experience at Harvard College. In that spirit, the Scholarship and Social Justice Conference has become a vital extension of our work. Since 2015, this conference has been organized by the Harvard College Center for Public Service and Engaged Scholarship, with the Harvard Foundation joining as a co-sponsor in more recent years. Together, we proudly welcome undergraduate scholars from colleges and universities across the country, representing both public and private institutions. Each year, we are deeply impressed by the rigor, creativity, and impact of the research being conducted by students, often rooted in lived experience and always driven by a desire to make our world more equitable, inclusive, and just. This conference has three primary goals: to honor scholarship that addresses pressing societal challenges related to equity, inclusion, and the experiences of historically marginalized communities; to illuminate community-engaged research that is rooted in reciprocity, mutuality, and the co-creation of knowledge, research that reaches beyond the academy and values diverse ways of thinking; and to provide undergraduate researchers with a platform for academic exchange and scholarly dissemination, engaging with faculty, peers, and the broader public. For student scholars, this is an opportunity to share your ideas, build your academic voice, and find a community of support. For faculty and mentors, this is a chance to witness how the next generation of scholars is redefining what research can look like when it centers justice, equity, and real-world impact. And for all of us, this is a moment to reflect on how we build a more inclusive academy, one where knowledge is not only created, but shared, challenged, and mobilized for the common good. Now, it is my honor to introduce this year's keynote speaker, someone whose work embodies the values at the heart of this conference. Dr. Maya Trotz is a professor of civil and environmental engineering at the University of South Florida. Her interdisciplinary work brings together natural and built infrastructure with and within coastal communities, often through co-created research that blends data with lived stories to inspire action. Dr. Trotz has led numerous initiatives to increase research access for undergraduate students and educators, and currently focuses on transforming undergraduate engineering education to meet the grand challenges of our time. She is a former president of the Association of Environmental Engineering and Science Professors and a board member of Fragments of Hope Corp, a nonprofit dedicated to coral reef restoration in Belize. Her research Her approach to research and education, collaborative, community-based, and action-oriented, perfectly aligns with the spirit of this conference. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to our keynote speaker, Dr. Maya Trotz.
Thank you, Dr. Brima. And good morning, everyone. It is truly an honor and a pleasure to be here at this time. We skipped a slide. So thanks again to Dr. Brima for that wonderful introduction, overview of the conference, and building up the high expectations for my talk, where I'll be speaking about how we build infrastructures that connect and synergize. And I'm probably, how many engineers we have in here? So I'm the only one. But that's great. So normally when we think of civil and environmental engineering, we think about our roads, our water, our built infrastructures. But I work a lot with people across other disciplines. And most importantly, I work with people whose daily lives are affected by the infrastructures that my discipline normally builds. And so I know the importance of social infrastructure, of digital infrastructure, educational infrastructures, ones that are probably more familiar to the fields that you represent today. Before I move on, I have a cough. And I was reminded in coming here in March 2021, I had just gotten to Guyana. It was February 25th, my birthday. My mom had a heart attack. During COVID, we decided that she should stay there and not travel back. Everybody stay in place. She was 79 years old. I was able to get a vaccine from my university. I'd also bought, the little mask with the glass front for $300 to wear on a plane. And I was able to travel there to be with her when she went to get a stent. A week later, the vaccine arrived in Guyana, one of them, and she was one of the first persons to get it. But unfortunately, it was a little too late because I think she contracted COVID when she went to get her stent. And this picture here is the last time I saw her, when I dropped her to the hospital, as she also had difficulty breathing. I did take a COVID test, and that's not what I have. But the cough is a reminder. And through this door here is my mom. And that is the last time I saw her. And I say this because I think COVID-19, where were you all? Middle school? High school? Middle? High school? And so we all went through a really traumatic period, and it changed our lives for a long time. For many of us, it was truly life-changing. And for those of you who've lost loved ones, you know the type of grief and change that comes with that, but you also know how you carry on. And in coming to Harvard, I thought about someone who I followed during COVID-19. And her name is Dr. Kizzy Corbett, now Hilaire. And she was one of the persons who discovered one of the vaccines that was first released. She worked with the NIH at the time, and she also spoke on TV. She spoke in churches, community groups, the NAACP. She knew what it meant to take the research to people who did not understand, one, what the virus was about, and two, what vaccines could do. She tried to break that down. And I think that is what we try to do as educators. And as for those of you who are in the room, this is what you strive to do moving forward, in particular at this time when higher education is being questioned for its importance in the US. I had 2 National Science Foundation grants to hold conferences. One in the end of 2020 for my association. It was virtual, looking at COVID-19 and its impact on engineering, environmental engineering. That Dyson air purifier there, that was one of the things that engineers were shouting. It's about your air quality. And who would not want better air quality if you could increase your ventilation rates? As we knew that this virus was spread by aerosols, or we were finding out that this virus was spread by aerosols. There was another professor here, I forgot his name, but there was a whole community on social media that formed, sharing information, learning with each other. As my mom was in hospital, I would never forget, it was a Tuesday. It was the last day, or it was the first day of one of the conferences, another conference I was holding on pandemic prevention. And I mentioned that that morning, I had heard from the doctor, actually I think I'd gotten to speak to my mom, and that she was recovering. Little would I know that a few days later, I would be picking her bag up from the gate of the hospital. But I continued doing the work and doing the research. And so what I'll share today, I think, is just dedicated to her, as she was someone who instilled the importance of education from a very young age. I completely followed my father's footsteps as a scientist, but my mom was the one who really emphasized the importance of education. So today, I'm going to talk about how we collaborate. And you're here. You've had an opportunity to meet each other yesterday. You're going to hear from each other today. You're going to visit each other's posters, talks. These are the connections that you start to build and that you hold them until you get to my age. I could probably be some of you, your mom and your grandmother, right? That's how old I am. But these circles of collaboration that I have now across disciplines, across universities, across communities, and across borders. I completed these slides this morning. I know you all wanted them from Tuesday. There's so much going on right now. And what I'm about to share are some of the research projects and experiences I've had probably over the last 2 weeks, going into next week, that gives an idea of the type of work that I do, but also the types of challenges that we face and ways in which I think many of you can intersect and identify with. A few weeks ago, I arrived in Belize, where I have a project. And many of the community members who I work with were planning an activity 8 a.m. on a Saturday morning. What you see here, and I blurred it out, make it look artistic so you couldn't see images per se, was the community members digging up the rocks that residents had placed along the beach to protect their newly built properties. These new residents to the area did not know that this was an area where the sand shifted, that normally flooded, but they were new from North America into Belize. And they had put these illegal structures to protect their properties. The communities downstream, of course, what happens, this is the peninsula here. And what happens when people start to put infrastructure in, engineering infrastructure, to save their property, what do we see happening here? So this is something that someone put in. What do you see here? You see sort of a beach kind of build up. And what do you see happening right behind it? You see a beach kind of being eaten away. And so the people downstream of wherever this infrastructure goes, they get impacted. This here is actually owned by Francis Ford Coppola. So we're not talking easy money in this place, right? From the Godfather type of fame. And the community members were working a little more downstream. I was able, within a month, to bring a colleague from the University of South Florida to start doing some erosion studies. And I'll play a video on sort of the impact that has had in the last week.
The ongoing erosion of Placentia sparked concern among the community, leading to discussions on how to tackle the problem before the popular tourist spot loses its entire beachfront. The Ministries of Natural Resources, Sustainable Development, and Infrastructure Development recently met with Placentia residents to address the issue. News 5's Marian Ali spoke with Bryce Dial, the Placencia Village Council Secretary, and Albert Loen, a property owner, who explained the plan to move forward. Here's a report.
In March, several Placencia residents gathered at the beach to remove rocks that had been piled up in front of a private property as a form of protection. The property owner, worried about erosion on his beachfront, had built the rock wall to preserve the area. However, environmental research shows that these rock walls cause erosion at other beachfront properties farther south on the peninsula. Erosion has been a problem in Placencia for a while now. Bryce Dial, Secretary of the Placencia Village Council, says that progress in one part of the area has led to problems for them in Placencia.
There's a lack of flow of sand coming to the peninsula now, partly because of extraction of material from the South Stand Creek River and diversions to the river. So there have been a diversion for pumping water for irrigation for the banana farm.
Who eats those bananas?
The erosion problem worsened for Placencia residents living south of the peninsula because those living to the north placed rocks on the beach in front of their homes to protect their beachfront.
If every single property owner along the coast is capturing sand, at some point there's going to be no sand moving down south, which is basically where we're at right now. So that natural replenishment that used to happen isn't happening. And we had a scientist here working along with a group called Strong Coast. And that scientist gathered data up the entire peninsula, and there was a meeting about, I think it's going on.
That's not Placencia.
And he said in the meeting, he's a specialist with coastal erosion. He said that these growings and that approach is not something that is recommended by the experts. It's just, it fixes the immediate problem in front of a property, but overall it causes more damage than good.
A professor of civil and environmental engineer,
That would be
at
me.
the University of South Florida, recently conducted.
Oops. Let me stop there. So that happened, and now we are written up in the news as sort of helping the community and the government address this problem. As my colleague made it clear, that when you look at places like Miami Beach, they were doing the same thing. And some of you might say, well, you should just retreat or leave. That's a hard thing for people to tell people who live by the coast, and it's really difficult when it's a high income earner for a country or a state. The retail, the rental, the real estate property, plus the income that comes from tourism is just too much. But this was Miami years ago, decades ago, the same types of groins and sea defenses. And then there was an approach that said it needed to be a longer approach. And they started to do something called beach nourishment. And who's gone to South Beach, Miami Beach? Anyone? So this is what it is. And it looked just like what Placencia looked like. In the project, in the video, they mentioned something called Strong Coast. And that is a project I lead, looking at really trying to get the geosciences to work more with coastal communities. And our project looks at coastal resilience, but focuses on coral reefs and mangroves as nature-based solutions. And so we're interested in, like, if you put a coral reef and a wave is coming in to the shoreline, that reef will reduce the wave energy. Or if you have mangroves, they'll do the same thing. What we found when we did our first workshop in Placencia in 2023, people are very into their reefs in Belize and into their mangroves. But at the same time, they're losing their properties because of the erosion we were showing. And we were like, well, we're not studying that because your erosion is based on this longshore transport. It's not the waves coming in. But we pivoted a month ago. because the community was literally telling a landowner who was out there and brought the police, who was telling them that those are my rocks. And they're in the ground, picking them up and saying, then put them on your property because this beach is public and this is our beach, right? So you kind of, when people lead, you follow. And the advantage of that is the project that I'm working on was inspired in Belize, really. This is a really large project with 12 different partners with research focused in Miami, the Virgin Islands, and Belize. And then the inspiration came from this small group called Fragments of Hope out of Placencia that had started to work at Laughing Bird Key National Park after a Cat 4 hurricane hit the area and destroyed a lot of the corals. But these corals had already been endangered, the ones shown here in these pictures, the acroporids. And they started to do active restoration. And so here's just sort of a time series showing what happened from 2010 and 2020, up to 2020. What do you see under the corals? Can you tell? What do you see hiding under there? Can you see? Fish, right? And then there are lobsters and all sorts of stuff. And if they're fish, then they're fishermen who can catch fish. If you have live coral, then you have people who want to come see those live coral. And I have a colleague who helped to invent the Pfizer COVID-19 vaccine. And he's always been telling me, he's like, you also have lots of pharmaceuticals that can come out of those corals. And I've been pleading with him to help because like COVID-19, what we're seeing is sort of intense bleaching and death of the coral reefs. So older folks would have seen that happen in the 80s, 90s. For someone like me in my 50s, younger, you would have seen something like this restored reef bring the acroporids back in the Caribbean, and then increase sea surface temperatures, in particular in 2023 and 2024, see these corals die. And so he's been telling me, I was like, how do we get the resources, the funding that we had for COVID-19 to look towards something like our oceans and our reefs, which provide so much resources for our world to address these issues that we have. And for some in the room, you probably already know what's causing an increase in sea surface temperatures. And you're probably working on solutions that are hopefully going to try to reduce those challenges. And it's going to be difficult right now. And in the end, you'll see what I'm talking about. So that was Belize a week ago. And this is Tampa urban flooding. So talk about increased sea surface temperatures. Now let's talk about increased rainfall intensities. We had Hurricanes Milton and Hurricanes Helene last semester, completely disrupted people's lives and so on. We have a flood resilience hub. We look at the impact of storms, but mainly on coastal properties. In urban setting, we don't have that data down. This picture was taken by Lena Young Green, and she sent it to the city and to a long list of people. This is from her area, and you could see the fire hydrant underwater. It was much higher. And she was asking, what is happening here? People were saying that they had these pumps that were pumping stuff out. She was like, no generators here. There's nothing pumping. We know there's a wastewater lift station. We could smell the shit, right? And she was underwater for quite some time. And Lena's always been asking and advocating for her community to make it one of the best places to live. So this is her stormwater pond. She probably was around here. Close to the area was public housing. So when you go here now, it's like a ghost town because the public housing is being revamped as it was found to have been built on part of a Black cemetery. So that's one of the reasons that they're revamping it, but there are probably others as this area gentrifies. But it's also a pond that drains this roadway, a highway. And in 2015, when I met Lena, she was fighting a highway expansion project. She, single-handedly, was the only one who spoke out against it. In 2016, after I'd gone to a meeting where her community was talking about this, there were about 300 people that spoke from 6 p.m. until 1 a.m., some for the highway and some against. And there's an article that came up in which I'll read, standing up and speaking out as a Black woman living in a racially integrated urban community, Young Green was reminding the audience that historically, highway expansion initiatives have disproportionately affected areas of the city that house large numbers of ethnic minority residents, devaluing and demolishing churches, schools, and other important cultural and social institutions. University of South Florida is a community-engaged university. So from the time I started there in 2004, I had started to work in communities that were close to the university, like not where Robles Park is, but the one across the street, one called East Tampa. I went to school at MIT in the 90s, and the walk to Harvard, you went through Central Square. It looks totally different to me. The demographic looks totally different. So what has happened in this area is what is happening where I am in Florida right now. The difference is, when I was at MIT, I had no professor who took me into Central Square or who took me into Roxbury, where I would see people who looked like me, who had challenges that engineers could address, who thought it important to work with the communities who live around your university, whose challenges with scarce resources make you innovate in ways that can change the world for better. And I say that to say that we are living in a time where it's important that our work really matters to people and that we really can communicate how our funding impacts people's lives. And we're learning how to do that. So this was one of the classes that developed because of this highway project and because our students in engineering normally have no clue who lives around them or who their infrastructure is supposed to serve. And so our students work with persons like Lena, and they get to meet the community, and they comment about the knowledge that they learn just from sitting and learning from people whose lives are impacted by the things that they have to study and design and build. The picture on the bottom is a research project that I have. This is part of my research group, really looking at what does water quality look like. Because for someone like Lena, she also does community gardens. And she wants to figure out how could she use this stormwater that drains your highways to irrigate food that would be healthier. Can you fix that, is what she challenges us. Because what the city has told her is that they could bring in treated wastewater, reclaimed water, and provide that for free. And there's skepticism there. As for many of you will think, well, you don't want to go toilet to tap. Anybody here from Orange County, California? Yeah, so toilet to tap is not a thing for you, right? You drink it. And so for engineers, it's learning how to have those discussions and deal with the research needed so that people have data to figure out, make a decision if something is what they would like to do. So this picture here is students in my lab class this semester collecting also some of those water samples for Miss Lena. But the stormwater work that I do dates back, to when I first started at USF. And I'm not sure if you all met Dr. Ken Thomas yesterday. So here he is as a PhD student in my research group. And I thought I would share it because I was his advisor. And so I think this invite to come here is because of that. And this was one of the communities, as I said, across the road from Miss Lena. And they had stormwater ponds. Everybody knows what a stormwater pond is? I don't know where you guys are from. Anybody from Florida, South Carolina? Yeah, maybe. We have a lot of water and we're flat. And so normally, if you're going to build, you have to make sure that when you build, the water that would have gone and infiltrated doesn't flood the one person next to you. And so what we put in is a lot of holes in the ground, our stormwater ponds. If you go to Florida or any place, you see these lakefront homes. So those are stormwater ponds that they rename lakes, and you pay higher property because everybody wants to be next to water, right? And so this community really was looking to revitalize their stormwater ponds. They were fenced at the time. Many did not want their kids to drown. Many did not know how to swim. And then they're like, well, these are eyesores with a fence, and they can actually become community spaces. And so I've worked quite a bit here. I must say it's been a struggle. As other parts of town have gotten much better infrastructure around their water, and here we're still struggling because the fish are floating up dead, and there's just not a lot of resources being spent in the area. And I know some of you work on housing, and so there are also discussions, well, can't we just cover them and put housing, because housing is scarce. For those of you who work in mental health, you would also know that it's important to have green spaces and water spaces in your communities. So how do you design and do both things? I'll play this short clip because some of this work is now funded through this project here. So just let me. Oops. The first National People of Color Environmental Summit was held in 1991, and through that, the 17 Principles of Environmental Justice were released. They really say that the earth is sacred and that we should make sure that everyone has access to healthy water, healthy air. We have a grant from the National Science Foundation that looks at civil and environmental engineering courses and how they can better align with community-led or informed or partnered research. We collaborate with the University of California, Berkeley, their civil and environmental engineering program there. This semester, we have our first class that is part of this grant that is co-taught by Dr. Christian Wells and Dr. Michelle Henderson, environmental justice. What we're trying to do right now is sort of look at communities in particular that have had more structural or systemic approaches to decision making around infrastructures that are part of or surround their communities, and think of how do you strategically as engineers do better with infrastructure so that communities that suffer pollution in those cases don't have to. USF is a community engaged university, and for a very long time faculty have built strategic relationships with various communities around the Tampa area. In the East Tampa community redevelopment area, they have a Jazzy Seniors group that is currently led by Miss Betty Bell.
I have lived in East Tampa for 53 years. I have been involved in ETCRP. I have been a neighborhood liaison.
We have a community council, and during one of our meetings, Ms. Connie Burton and Valerie Bullock, who are members of the council, talked about the importance of telling stories of people from and within the community. Dr. Michelle Henderson, who is American Society of Engineering Education postdoctoral fellow, partnering with us on this grant, develop that relationship with the Jazzy Seniors and take the students from the class that she's co-teaching with Dr. Wells on environmental justice to bring them into the space, meet the Jazzy Seniors, ask questions, collect oral history, and really think about how can that inform what we do in projects moving forward.
This class was really interesting for me as an engineer because I've never taken an anthropology class before. It was the first time we've really gotten to interact with the community is our main focus.
It's one thing to sit in class every day and read a ton of research papers, but it's a different thing when you come to the community and you sit down with people and you actively listen.
We had so much fun when I was talking to the students that we went, everybody was leaving and we were still sitting there talking and said, okay, y'all gotta break this up.
We got to tour a lot of the locations that we're speaking about, see the ponds, meet the people that are affected by these areas.
What was most amazing to me after interacting with the seniors is the story that they told me of resilience and how a community can turn into a family.
The students were very excited to talk to seniors. It made me think back to when I was working in the school system, talking to children.
I felt that they were evaluating the community to see if the responsible peoples were doing the things that they should be doing.
It was really interesting to learn about the history that they've been through and the history of East Tampa itself. I didn't realize the level of change that had been taken by different agencies and for the community.
We all want to live in healthy communities. And unfortunately, in the US and many places around the world, some communities and some people don't have options based on sort of the legacies of where they live. This project gives us an opportunity to partner with communities to explore environmental injustices, issues related to lack of transportation infrastructure, lack of clean water, exposure to other contaminants that we normally address as environmental engineers. Other ways that we can follow up are definitely looking at grants and funding right now under various federal initiatives that address issues around.
Okay, those are all gone away.
EJ4 initiatives. I think how community like East Tampa or various partners there can access those grants, in particular as many of them deal with infrastructure. We have multiple other classes and multiple other opportunities to co-develop proposals and projects that support directly what the Jazzy seniors are interested in. We also have researchers who are interested in co-developing projects and research with East Tampa community members and within East Tampa. So that will continue, and some will be informed by what the Jazzy seniors say.
The past is so important to us, and especially to the seniors. So it's always exciting to talk to young people about what we seniors have gone through and how we plan on focusing on the future.
Oops. One of the Jazzy seniors, hi Ken, I just showed your picture. One of the Jazzy seniors who Ken knows and who had a really big impact on making USF a community engaged university classified by the Carnegie Foundation was Mrs. Evangeline Best. And she really was the one who worked with me, with our students and our researchers in showing us how you engage with community. And when she did an interview for the Jazzy Seniors video and book that we produce, she made it clear, she said, when you were born here and you never left here, it's all you had. And my thing is that looking back, I never heard the word poor, right? So we're working in a time when we're talking about disadvantaged and marginalized communities and so on. And she said, I never heard ugly words, but I think it was the environment that was in because we were living here, right? So just to say, Tom, I use these quotes from the Jazzy seniors in class to help people think about how they start to engage and how they work with people who may be from somewhere different from where they are from. So next week, I am supporting an environmental hazards conference next Tuesday and Wednesday that brings Florida communities together in Tampa to really talk about what they are experiencing, to share their stories. And the lead on this is Walter Smith. And he is part of a project that I lead called Blue Gap. And we have a cohort of Alliance members from Iowa, from Tampa Bay, and from the US Virgin Islands who work together to sort of figure out what is their story that connects them when we're talking about a grand engineering challenge, which is nitrogen pollution. Does anyone in here know what nitrogen pollution is? No. But it's one of the grand engineering challenges that for every proposal that engineers write, that's one of the things we look at, right? So it's when you go to the bathroom and you pee, a lot of nitrogen comes out of there. It goes to the wastewater treatment plant. If not treated properly, it gets into your surface waters. As a nutrient, it fuels algae. As the algae grow, they block sunlight from getting into the water. And also as they die, they use up the oxygen. So you have these large, vast areas of oxygen depleted parts of your surface water. Therefore, you have no fish. They're called dead zones. And they're growing around the world. And then some are becoming toxic. So they're called harmful algal blooms. But nobody knows it. But you know more about water quality. How many of you drank the tap water here today? So like half of the room, right? And I'm drinking this. So when we think of water quality, we definitely think of tap water. When we start to think of water quality in terms of our surface waters, probably less aware of some of the challenges that we, with every activity that we do, influence. And so this is Walter, and I'll just share some of the work that he does. And I haven't coughed yet. I put all these videos in here.
An example of an activity that we have done that has been very, very successful is the Toxic Bus Tour. Toxic Bus Tour has been extraordinary. Toxic Bus Tour actually brings people from different walks of life and was designed to do that, to bring them together, to get them in one place on a bus, captive audience, to actually go out into the areas where you're able to see the energy burdens in different communities firsthand. And everybody's on the bus to see it. And then you go down and travel down what we call the toxic coast. And you see firsthand the operations that are contributing to these issues, these environmental issues that people have to face. And when they see these things firsthand, quite often, many of the people that are on the bus are professionals and have never actually seen these operations ever. Quite often you have politicians who've been there and they've never seen these operations ever. Don't even know how they exist and how they impact people. And so this particular activity, the Toxic Bus Tour, allows people to be able to see firsthand how these things happen, how they impact folks, and what can be done in order to change those operations, how they can organize amongst themselves, and to and understand even the different aspects of what happens in the course of a disaster. Whenever a disaster hits, that's when these operations really, really can impact people. And so we see all these different nuances of the environmental impacts on people and how these impacts take place. And that's the importance of the Toxic Bus Tour.
So I get to work with Walter next week as he introduces us to more people doing this type of work in the Tampa Bay. And that project, this is a summary of the project. Oops.
Did you know there's an invisible form of pollution that costs the US $200 billion every year?
Nitrogen from vehicle emissions, farming, fertilizing your lawn, sewage, and other human activities ends up in water, where it causes algae blooms, destroys fisheries and marine habitats, gets into tap water, and creates other serious problems.
Communities like Tampa Bay have had success reducing bigger sources, but now need to tackle thousands of smaller ones. Take nitrogen fertilizer. It increases crop yields, and that means more economic growth. But overuse has unintended consequences. Destroyed fisheries and poor health undermine a healthy economy. We can start by bringing affected people into the decision-making process.
You have to talk about nitrogen in terms that people really care about.
Blue Gap is working to bridge upstream and downstream communities, amplifying the voices of community champions like Hilary Van Dyke. They funded and produced her documentary, A Splash of Color Getting Black in the Water.
Historically, Black people have been excluded from fully participating in water activities. When people use aquatic spaces, they actually care about what happens to them.
Blue Gap partner, the Tampa Bay Estuary Program, is also helping her put on community events like this one, where families are helping rebuild oyster habitats.
Not only are we helping improve water quality, we're also exposing people to this idea that they can be part of a recovery success story. We're building relationships with the Virgin Islands and with Iowa to pass on some of those lessons that we learned about how to tell the stories.
Data is another piece of the puzzle.
Blue Gap collects data that's currently scattered across multiple sources into a single website that anyone can access to learn about how nitrogen pollution affects their area. We're already hard at work in Tampa Bay, Iowa, and the US Virgin Islands. And we're excited to add more watersheds across the country and the world very soon.
So our site actually launches next week. And we've also produced another documentary. This is just a trailer.
The relationship with Black people and water in general is something that is murky.
And it just goes back to the way that the Mississippi River is treated as like that might as well just be another highway. Industry has staked its claim and everyone else has been shut out.
When we see where areas that have the nastiest or the most polluted water, it tends to be in those communities that look like me.
But you can't separate the economic from the racism.
If we really want to be good stewards of this earth, of this land, then we have to know when to say when.
The community in Belize that is removing rocks from the beach so they can get their natural sand flow back are saying when. This documentary is the final version, hopefully be coming out this year. As you can imagine, it's a really tough time to be sharing this kind of information. But this is the data that we've collected, because when we started this project, we thought we were how do we bring trusted data on government websites? How that data is disappearing. How do we bring that data into the community so they could understand it? And community told us, whether in Iowa, anywhere, stories are data and stories are what are gonna get our attention first. And that's how we got to create so much media. And this idea of stories and data for action. And I'm glad I have them, because as I said, I had a cough and I was able to share a lot of this media and not have to speak too much today. But I wanted to circle back to where I'm from, which is Guyana. And right now, we are one of ExxonMobil's most profitable areas, as we started to produce oil in 2018. We're also a neighbor to Venezuela, which has the largest oil reserves in the world. And so what we see playing out here is this, you see these women, they're from a group called Red Thread, and they're talking about our local Environmental Protection Agency, asking, who's monitoring hazardous radioactive waste? As what they're protesting here for this area covered in is one of the first communities that was bought by previously enslaved persons after they were no longer enslaved. And what you have happening, because they're next to the river, is these foreign companies coming and trying to set up, including some from Trinidad and Tobago, coming to set up industries that are going to treat the waste that comes from the oil industry. So again, in a really short period of time, you are seeing an area, or I'm seeing an area where I'm from, transform dramatically. And when we think of who benefits from that oil, who benefits from the market that Exxon trades on, and how they benefit because there are not many environmental protections in Guyana, and there's not much people can say. I'm obviously quite vocal, but while I'm vocal, I'm also really careful, because I know what this development means for many people there, and it means a lot of money. So just to say that I think you all are living in a time where we need solutions. I shared from an engineering perspective, but I think there are intersections with what all of you are working on. I have 2 minutes left, and I know that Ken had asked me to talk about sort of my trajectory into the work that I'm doing, and I sort of went the other way and just saying here's what I'm working with in the last 2 weeks. I'm from Guyana, and I shared the work that I do in Belize and where I am in Tampa Bay. I tried to connect it through the Trans-West Atlantic, and one of the things that we see is this sargassum. Anybody knows what sargassum blooms are? Any of you guys live near a beach or anything? It's this big macro algae, lots of it that flows in, sometimes piles higher than me and smells like shit when it starts to degrade. It's like hydrogen sulfide. You can't breathe, which may be why I can't breathe right now, because it's in Belize right now. But it comes from the Sargassum Sea down the coast of Africa in the mid-Atlantic due to natural processes. There's still research out there on the reasons. High upturn in nutrients, and then it kind of flows into the Caribbean, up through the Gulf of Mexico and around here and back out. So our seas connect us, our peoples connect us, our institutions connect us, and we kind of like loop back. You would have seen people in my video who were like from different projects. And so by the time you get to my age, you kind of build your community. And so that's what you all are starting to do here. And that's what you all have been doing for the past 10 years with this conference. And I'll end on this one, as we just had an expedition to space with 8 women. And then we had some comments about burning waste in space as a serious idea. And I would say when I was an undergrad choosing where to go to university, I wanted to go do theater, which I did all through high school. And my mom, who I talked about in the beginning, was like, no, you're not going to do theater. And she brought these books home about chemical engineering. And on one of the covers, it had an image of sending waste to space. And it said, celebrating 100 years of chemical engineering. And so I became a chemical engineer at MIT. And I worked at Mobil Oil, now ExxonMobil, for 2 years and loved it, because I was doing research in the refinery. I worked at Polaroid and loved it because I was doing research. And that is what you are doing. You are doing research and you'll love every part of it. But that was not what was for me. I found out and went into environmental engineering, and now I'm back making movies, right? So I'm kind of circling back and building on all of those skill sets. And later on in life, I learned that that was an image from Isaac Asimov, and it was really kind of science fiction. But science fiction is kind of built on what scientists and engineers do, taken to an extreme. And I think right now, we need to push back on some of what science and engineers do, because the kind of thinking I shared today is not what's common in engineering. They don't do interdisciplinary work. They don't work with communities. And we need to have more of that. And to me, that's where the innovation is in engineering. And I've been supported from the National Science Foundation to do this work. It may go away, and we'll figure out how to continue to do work, because communities will continue to live. Thank you very much. These are our QR codes for the different projects.
All right, take some pictures. Thank you very much. I gotta say, I am the person who, despite having a math teacher for a father, failed math and science several times. But I find the work that engineers do kind of magical in bringing back areas that have been destroyed by humans, but other humans are coming in and rescuing them. So thank you. We have a Q&A going. We have just about 10 minutes. And I have a mic for anybody who has questions.
I was thinking students first, but I'll get it started. So you're hoping that the work will continue. Do you have any creative ideas at this point about how to continue to finance all of this important, good work?
So I think there's probably private sector to look at. Blue Gap, for example, was supposed to churn out a company. And we kept thinking we'll be a nonprofit. I work with a group called Black and Marine Science, and they've been, under attack right now. And also saying that, 501c3s may not be around, which Harvard is experiencing right now. So really thinking of how to be self-sustaining. Yeah. So those are definitely things to think about. I manage so much of these. Funding has not been pulled as yet. I really have not had a chance to think about that. Yeah.
There we go. Thank you.
Perfect. Hi, thank you so much for your time today. I was actually curious about a very specific thing. I'm forgetting the terminology, but when you talked about the beaches and specifically how you've been removing rocks to allow for natural sand flow, you did mention a point about tourism and how when people are making the most amount of money, that's been like the biggest roadblock. I was just curious to learn a little bit more about that, like how you've been navigating speaking with the corporations or the groups that are bringing in a lot of money and being able to make the solution work in respects to them as well.
Yes, so I think the Placencia areas is unique, and thanks for the question, because it used to be a fishing village, it then became tourism. And now it's just getting a lot more attention. So you see sort of like the family-owned land that went from sea to lagoon being split up and sold, and community no longer being able to afford to live on the peninsula as people are coming in to buy up property. And there's a faculty member here who wrote an interesting book on sugar, looking at diabetes in St. Bite and Dangriga, I think, which is along that peninsula, and the fact that people can't afford care, and so folks come to buy their land and pay a little for it so that they could afford care, but then they turn it into these tourist resorts that then locals can't afford to live on the peninsula anymore. So that's what you're experiencing there. But what you also have are Placencia residents who still have property, still have land, who are really, really committed to their coral reefs and their mangroves, and they're going to fight for them. And you're seeing it evolve. You may have heard of like San Pedro, La Isla Bonita, which is completely different. It's docks, it's rocks, and you could stand in San Pedro and the reef is right there. You could see it. You could see the waves coming and they hit the reef and then it's calm, right? But they're looking a little like Miami. And so you're seeing Placencia that may, in time, look like a Miami. But the discussions might be, well, do you put in a beach that's 250 feet wide? Or do you want to do some nourishment that's 20 feet wide, which is what you're accustomed to? And nourishment is just that if the sand is out there, you could bring some on. With Strong Coast, we're also looking at hybrid reefs, because in Miami right now, they're also looking at, can you put a kind of seawall under the water that could support coral reefs so that you could reduce some of that wave energy coming in. But it's coming in on an already nourished space.
Excellent. Thank you.
Tourism is like on steroids right now. Yeah.
Hi, Dr. Trotz. Thank you for speaking today. I wanted to ask about what your thoughts are on the global freshwater crisis and how I feel like today, or in like the US context, we forget that fresh, clean, palatable water is actually not an infinite resource, and it is very finite, especially in global underdeveloped settings where there is this huge scarcity of water. Are there ways that we can enact change, either in our mentality of how we think about water here, or ways that we can help in global aspects?
Oh, for sure. And I think there are ways that, as a student, that you can learn and experience it. And to me, it's sort of like seeing places that are dealing with water scarcity. So islands have challenges with water scarcity. I remember a few years ago, I went to Madagascar, and one of the projects there was looking at water, fresh water. And we were in the southern part, and it was, I'd never seen somewhere so dry. and they had a river. And I remember in the river, passing over it, you saw the cows, you saw, I can't remember if it was horses, but all the livestock, people, everybody was in the water. They were washing, they were bathing, the cows were drinking, they were, in the cool. And we were going to villages where groups had put in these pumps, these water pumps, hand pumps, that allowed you to get some of the groundwater. But one of the things they used in the float was lead, right, that you get from a battery. And so we know lead is a challenge. And so thinking of how you work with the local developers of these systems or the local installers to change from lead to something else that might be more appropriate and healthy. And as we were driving, it was these huge sisal plantations that use the water from the river for sisal. And then when you get to the beach area of Fort Dauphin, it's Rio Tinto's titanium dioxide plant, right? And we all use TiO2 in lots of our products and our paints. That is to say that to me, it was opening my eyes to see places that had water scarcity like I'd never seen before. I'm someone who grew up in a country where you had to lift water by a bucket when it came. You filled it up. Where when it came, it was brown. It may have some little worms in it, so you put a cloth over your tap if it was coming through the tap, and that was your filtration. That's what you do at a filtration plant. And then you might let it settle, and you take a thing and you learn to bathe with a bucket, right? And you don't get to the bottom part because that's where your sediment is. So that was the kind of scarcity I grew up in, but I never experienced that kind of dryness and that kind of like literally absence of water, and that kind of seeing women and little kids carrying water in all different types of containers. And so that's the kind of work that some of our students did, mainly through programs that were supported by the Peace Corps' Masters International program. That's the kind of program that's disappeared or disappearing. And I don't know how, you replace that so that people sort of see how other things happen around the world to really value sort of the system that you have, if you have it. But I think that's important in creating experiences so that you know what scarcity looks like. Because as we build and increase our populations, we are going to experience those same things where we are. The challenges that we have in the US right now are things like PFAS, which are contaminating our waters. For those of you who cook, you may have gotten rid of all your Teflon, cookware. But that's one of the challenges that we face. And it's a health risk, but it's in our waste, it's in our treatment plants. And we have to figure out how to analyze for it and how to get rid of it so that we are drinking clean water. Someone in Madagascar may not have the levels of PFAS that we see here when we have our firefighting, that it's in firefighting materials. So I think being able to understand the context that someone is working in, but also realizing that fresh water is kind of the next oil, right? It is oil. It is like oil. It's more scary. Like it's a big challenge.
Hi. First of all, thank you for a wonderful presentation. So my name's Alistair. I'm from Las Vegas, so middle of desert nowhere. And so water scarcity is a really relevant topic where we're from because we rely on the Colorado River. And not only that, Nevada is not the only state that relies on that water source, right? We have Arizona, we got Colorado, we got Utah, we got California. 2022, we actually had one of our worst droughts, and Lake Mead, which is that artificial lake created by the Hoover Dam, basically hit historic lows, and we were basically forced to really use our water in a very scarce amount, which actually, as a result, a lot of students at the university that I attend have opted to pursue policy or opted to pursue a career in water conservation. Now, obviously, a lot of us here come from different backgrounds. My background's in economics and math. What's a piece of advice that you would like to share for all of us students here when it comes to this topic and how we can use our respective platforms to advocate for something like this?
So I think the best would be just learn about where you are. Where does your water come from is something I ask my students. Do you know when you turn on your tap, who's your utility? Do you read the annual report? Do you know where your water comes from? Is it from a river? Is it from a groundwater source? Learn about the dam. People are taking dams down in some locations. Learn about the policies around irrigation. Like, who are your main users? What are you growing? Why are you growing a crop that requires so much water? Why are you watering just so much so you could keep your water rights? That's what, in some cases for farmers. So I'd say just learning more and talking to people. One of the farmers I showed, Seth Watkins, he talks about in Iowa where they're being, that they used to grow 158 crops. They used to be the breadbasket of the world, and people think that they are, but right now they grow corn and they grow soy. They feed the hogs and they feed the cars. Right? And he's like, and my kids can't enjoy here because our waterways are polluted, because our towns are dying, our rural towns are dying. And he's trying to bring his prairie lands back. He's trying to do a different kind of agriculture. And he's showing that the way he's doing it is actually profitable. And it has so many other benefits. So I think it's finding those stories and telling those stories and aligning with those persons to think of what are the action items. And I'd be really curious, one of the demographics that we've missed with Blue Gap is young people, right? We presented last week Wednesday in the Virgin Islands to middle and high school students. I was like, we don't really have any videos to show them. It's all like people over 20, 25, over 30. So think of ways too on how you also build your own stories and your own movements. Some of us are kind of a little out of touch. Yeah.
Is anybody on this side that had a question? Because I didn't want.
Thank you. Hi, Dr. Trotz. I'll stand. I'm really impressed by, I guess, your ability and Blue Gap's ability to engage the community. I think that's sometimes a really hard thing for young people to do, for activists to do, especially college students. Many of us aren't from Boston or aren't from the places that we go to school. And so I guess I wanted to ask how engaging the community works on the opposite end for people who might be, living and are interested in environmental advocacy, specifically with populations maybe that are affected by pollution, and so oftentimes these people have been living there their entire lives and don't know possibly that they're even living in a super polluted, high environment that's really detrimental to their health. And so I guess how do you communicate and bring in people from the community to your cause? And not to be patronizing in that they don't know, or there's not a movement going on. But I was just wondering how do you find success with the messaging to engage all these different people and really the stakeholders that are most affected by these types of policies?
Thanks for that question. I think the work that we do really works with boundary spanners. So they're people who are already in the community, who are kind of sort of leaders. And you may go through how do you select who to work with, right? And so already it might be through churches, through organizations, but having someone who's that liaison for you, which would have been a Walter or a Seth, we have persons who actually work with community, with residents in a location, saying community is sort of like a physical space. You're here in Boston? Okay, so I'm not sure if you're in Harvard or where, but one of the persons who I really admired when I was an undergrad was someone named Mel King, who was in urban planning or urban studies at MIT, which wasn't sort of a discipline that I knew. I was chemical engineering. I didn't, engage much in that, although I did minor in theater. And so I ended up sort of seeing the types of things that Mel was doing. We would always be supporting events and so on. And they have the Mel King Institute here in Boston right now, which I know does a lot of that community engaged work. So I would just go hang around there and learn and see what they're working on. And I'm sure there are ways that you would align. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate that. And I also really appreciate how you kind of really embody engaged scholarship in terms of taking knowledge from community and working with community, but also finding multiple ways of getting the word out and getting the research out. So thank you very much. And thank you for the shout out to Mel King. He's been a big supporter of our work here. He passed away a few years ago, but his work continues, and I'm always happy to talk about Mel. But right now, we're going to go on to the morning sessions. The first sessions are panel A on incarceration will be here in this event hall. The second panel will be U.S. BIPOC experiences over in the community hall, followed by lunch. And we're going to have a little art project during lunch, and everybody is welcome to participate. If you have more questions for Dr. Trotz, because I saw some more hands up, she will be here with us all day long. And you can grab her at lunch, as well as our other speakers. So if you didn't get a chance to talk to them yesterday, we've got more time today. So the speakers for the two panels, if you could go to your places, and we'll make sure your slides are queued up. And everybody else, time for bio break, stretch a little bit, and then head to the two halls. Thank you.